Hi, and welcome to CMO Journeys. I'm Christian Banach, and on the show, I talk with the marketing leaders behind some of today's most interesting brands. We get into their career paths, how they think about marketing, and how they work with agencies. Southern Technical College is a career-focused education institution helping students build practical skills for fields like healthcare, skilled trades, and other in-demand areas. Sandy Kaup started at Southern Technical College and recently expanded his CMO role across several sister colleges, giving him a rare view into both school-level marketing and portfolio-wide revenue growth. Sandy, welcome to CMO Journeys.
No, thanks for having me.
So if somebody was to have known you when you were 18, I'm curious, would they have predicted that you would end up as a CMO?
Well, I don't think they had that job available even. There wasn't even a title when I was 18 years old. So I would say the answer to that is no. Being that I started this journey in this field in 1992. And just basically worked my way up. Started working at a small college as a rep and kind of worked my way up. So no, I don't think anybody would have thought the title CMO, because I think it's a relatively new title.
Yeah, sure.
Of C's at least.
In there, yeah, exactly. So you had mentioned that you kind of grew up through admissions and then eventually, moved into marketing. I'm curious, how did that experience shape the way you think about marketing, revenue, and really the student journey today?
Yeah, I think for me, they always say, necessity, is probably the greatest impetus for invention, right? So working in admissions at a small school, we needed more leads. I could see it when I started there. There was just lead flow was really terrible. So I just went ahead being the type of person that's like, hey, how can I make myself more successful? The ownership at the time, I started at a place called St. Louis College of Health Careers. I'm 22 years old. So within 6 months, he made me the director of marketing and everything because nobody else had done it before. So everything that I went about was how can I grow the business, right? So back then in the 90s, it was like you'd put a TV commercial out during Maury Povich or whatever, and Ricky Lake, the phone would ring 6 to 12 times. So boom, you had that immediate response. But back then we were using direct mail. We used a multifaceted approach, and you could track kind of all of that material. So everything that I kind of from the beginning was focused on making starts, right? Which is like, hey, make starts because that's how you get revenue. So I always used, different key performance indicators to kind of track what we're spending and what we're getting out of it. So I think that's kind of was the basis for my journeys, because nobody was doing this really. No one was tracking as much information. It's hard as it is to believe in lead sources back in the 90s. And I've pretty much taken that philosophy, everywhere, every step of the way as I move forward.
Yeah. So do you think this has actually, how you came up, gave you a different view of what marketing is actually supposed to do?
I think so, I'm not going to sit there and say it gave me a different view. Obviously, I went to college and did a major in management, MIS. I studied all the stuff on marketing and advertising. I think it's interesting. We were owned by an equity group before they sold a few years ago. So the equity group, kind of came down, and they would always do their own assessments and everything else. And they were the ones that were like, hey, you know what? This guy should be in charge of the whole thing because he has both sides to it. And what they kind of said to me was that usually marketing people are focused on just marketing and sales are focused on sales. So I believe that the CMO, when they can build those two things together, they're working together, that's when you have the greatest success. That's probably what I brought to the table, was melding the two different philosophies to make sure that we're adhering to the business goals as well as the other goals.
Yeah. Was there maybe a specific moment or opportunity or a role that you were in that made you really realize that that marketing wasn't just about generating the interest, but really about that kind of full revenue engine, that you're talking about here?
Yeah, so one of the things that the marketing people always focused on, especially when Google first started coming up, was about, they would be like, oh, how many clicks we're getting. It was all about clicks. It's all about branding. But you know what? Does it translate into leads? It doesn't matter how great your branding is. In this industry, you need a lead. Like, you need to physically be able to call somebody. It's a one-to-one action. So I think it's different in every industry and for every business and every business model. So I think it's really important to kind of reverse engineer the flow. People kind of look at that. Everybody wants to talk about the sales funnel, for example, right? And they usually build the funnel from the top down. And I kind of believe it should be built the other way. And that's what I've tried. That's what I've tried to do, again, just to maximize revenue. In the industry as a whole, there was a big change where everybody was like, you know what? We don't need to do TV anymore. The traditional marketing is bad. We should do everything on Google. They used to always call it search engine optimization. I always laughed about that because it wasn't search engine optimization. It was really Google optimization because Bing had such a small percentage of it, right? So everything that everybody was doing kind of became that, to the point where a lot of places abandoned the traditional marketing, right? Because everything went digital. I think it's interesting with the influx of AI now, we're almost having to go back and do more of everything and be more diversified, because it's not just looking at Google now, because AI looks at the entire web, looks at everything, right? So I think that's changing the way we look at things and how we do things. And we're actually going to be going back going forward.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Multiverse, marketing, I would say.
Yeah, I want to come back to that when we start talking about what you're doing currently at the college. But to stay kind of in your earlier journey, I'm curious. You mentioned that you were admissions. You made the shift to marketing. They kind of just threw you in there. What did it feel like for you making that? Did it just feel natural that you were kind of already doing this, or was it a step where you felt maybe out of your depth at some point?
I think people had a lot of trust in me, and I developed a lot of things myself. Like I said, the KPIs, kind of looking at cost per interview, cost per start, not just looking at cost per lead. And then the market kind of came to me. So, for me, it was pretty natural. It was like, hey, what do I need to do? My owner was like, this is what we need to do to be successful. Here, go do it. Just gave me the budget, left it all in my hands. And for some people, they would do nothing. But for me, that was really easy because you didn't need to manage me. So I think for me, it felt pretty natural right away. And we had immediate success. I think that's the other thing that happens sometimes when you do something and you have success, people tend to believe in you more, even if it was luck. So I was lucky that way, I think, in terms of just the timing was there for me.
Yeah. You sound like you've had a lot of mentors and people that you've worked with. You mentioned the PE company and directors. I'm curious if there was a piece of advice or someone specific in your life that really helped influence who you are today.
Well, I would say my dad always worked really hard. He self-made. You know, kind of came and raised himself up, I think. So that's where I think most of my work comes from, because I always believe, like, hey, hard work's gonna power through. You got to be lucky, you got to be smart, you got to do the right things, you got to stay informed. Technology is always changing, so you got to be a consumer of information. I think a lot of people are followers, and they see the line going like this. So let me just jump on that line. So I'm going to be like, okay, let's jump on that line, but let's look to see if there's a better way to go even faster. So I think a part of my philosophy has always been, it's good to, if people are all zigging, it's good to zag because you get to the same place, right? But you have less barriers. So, and to always track that data. I'm a big believer in, you can have a philosophy, give it a chance. You should try different things out, but then you got to measure that data, and you got to make sure that you're measuring the right data that's going to impact your revenue in the end. And I think that's a big key. I think we get lost sometimes because, if you have 100 leads and you have the best sales reps in the world, they're going to do better than the worst sales rep with the same 100 leads. So that's why tying the two things together and training and development is very important. Having the end user understand what went into getting the lead and teaching them the best way to work it based on more information makes a big difference. And then once you have success, then obviously people are going to trust you more and more ideas and everything else moving forward. So I think that's a big key to the success, making sure that the parts fit well together.
Yeah. So you mentioned your dad. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri.
Yeah. And what did your dad do for a living?
My dad's a doctor. He came from India, in 1966, by himself. Went here and, got scholarships to go to school, like one or two. So, he went to LSI. He did all of it. He came through as a legal immigrant,
Sure.
and had to work really hard his whole life, put in a lot of hours and everything else. So, I always saw that, and he taught me those values.
Yeah. I love that. So you've had a long run now at Southern Technical College.
It's very unusual for my position, for sure.
Yeah. What's kept you there, and how have you seen maybe the role change? As the institution has evolved?
Well, the CEO at my when I was working at Florida Career College, he got let go. His name was Pedro de Guzman. So when he opened up this school, he remembered my resume that I did marketing and admissions. Instead of hiring two people, he's like, "Hey, can you do both for me?" I probably to a fault. I'm a pretty loyal person. I just put my head down and work. And my family's happy here in Florida. I've had many opportunities to go, but they didn't want to move, or the money wasn't right, all those kind of things. And I've never been looking because I'm happy. And then knock on wood, we got sold, and we got even better owners when the equity group bought us. We have two amazing owners right now that are always reinvesting in the company, reinvesting in the people, reinvesting in the talent, in the infrastructure, and have a long-term and short-term vision to grow. So I think in some ways I've been pretty lucky as far as that goes, but I've also just not felt the need to jump elsewhere. That's just not who I am.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. You don't find that loyalty like used to. So let's talk about your role today, because as I understand, your role has actually expanded, beyond STC to include some of the sister colleges as well. Tell us a little bit about what your kind of day to day looks like now.
Yeah, I mean, well, basically, I had STC, so I was running the admissions and marketing at STC, and we had seven colleges and three nonprofits, and we've done really well since I took over it in 19 officially, and there was nobody else there. So when they bought us, they kind of had a different philosophy from how a school should be run. But again, at the end of the day, revenue trumps all that kind of stuff, and so they're kind of seeing that, wow, what they're doing here really works. We're big believers in outcomes. To me, what you put in is what you get out. I always tell people we're in the business of changing lives while meeting shareholder, stakeholder, and customer expectations. I think a lot of companies get off track when they try to put like the business first. When you're appealing to the customers and outcomes are most important, everything else will fall into place and you'll keep on doing better. So it's important to kind of meld those things, but not just be too much in one area.
Yeah. What are you finding now? I mean, because you talked a little bit earlier about AI and how things are changing. What are the biggest marketing levers that are actually moving enrollment and revenue for you today?
I think currently over the last year, a lot of schools invested only in Google, right? And Google has gone down. I mean, in every single business, you're not getting as many clicks. It's because Google is literally putting all their money in Gemini because they know this is the way things go. So like, most, I don't know, which AI do you use the most?
I'm probably more ChatGPT still, but increasingly more and more Claude.
Claude. So you can kind of see. So like, if you look at back in the day, I don't know how old are you?
I'm 47.
47. You're a little younger than me, but you probably remember the time when people used Yahoo as a search engine, or
Sure.
or
Yeah.
AOL or Dogpile, but Google won, right? So everyone just kind of Googles everything. So I think we're at a stage now where one of these is going to win. ChatGPT, Claude. ChatGPT was probably an early leader. Google has the most money, and what is Google going to do? They'll probably try to buy whoever is the most, because that's how companies kind of succeed. But I think what's happening right now is people aren't going to Google anymore, and ChatGPT is giving you a summary. So that's the biggest change is pay per click. And since pay per click was in this particular our industry in particular, but in a lot of industries became so big, that's what's changing right now. ChatGPT now is starting to sell ads and stuff, right? So eventually they'll probably garner the same model once the market leader emerges. And I think that's really the challenge right now is, there's always information on we're trying to affect the algorithm or whatever. There's so many touch points now with IP addresses, texting, phones. There's so much technology change. Our business is based on communication with people. So, being a good chief marketing officer, you got to look at not just the marketing and advertising, but you got to look at the sales. You got to look at the telephony. You got to look at the infrastructure, the communication, how leads come in, how leads go out. So I think it's a little bit deeper, and some people just stay in their silos and they don't
Yeah.
realize, well, the problem is your phone system or your communication or your email or your text, or you're not using enough of those things. So you asked me the question in terms of with the sister schools I've got, and that's kind of what I'm bringing. I'm bringing structure and process and more entry points and exit points so that we can reach more people, whether it be paper leads, pay per click, social media, outdoor advertising, billboard, digital. It's really including the whole marketing mix, but giving yourselves those opportunities to hit those areas and trying to stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah. So where do you see yourself increasingly spending? Would you anticipate over, say, the next 6 to 18 months? And what would need to be true to continue to justify that investment?
Well, so I like we measure everything every month. Like I said, cost per start, cost per enrollment, cost per interview, cost per lead, cost per appointment. So having those six different places where you can actually see stuff, and we've been driving, and the goal is to always get more efficient with that, right? So we're driving the cost down. So right now the costs are coming down, so I'm trying to reinvest some of that in AI, right?
Mhm.
Because it's like that's kind of the wave of the future, right? So there's a bunch of different companies all doing the same thing right now, and they're trying to sell what they call AI agents, right? Which is what could we're not trying to replace somebody that works for us, but we can definitely leverage that for nights and weekends. Some people are going to like that. I think the younger generation, for example, has no problem talking to an AI. They enjoy it. They just want to get their information and get out. People maybe over 30, 35, they don't want to deal with that at all. So it's navigating that parameters. And because stuff is so new right now, that's really where there's going to be a pain point to that, right? Luckily, we have good owners that believe in infrastructure. So it's kind of like, hey, we're going to have to do this. We can either wait and we can do this a year from now where we're playing catch up, or we can try to be ahead of the game and get in kind of when the costs are a little bit lower. So that's where I'm at right now with it is trying to basically, we know that the clicks are getting less. Google's trying to charge more. So in a perfect world, you take some of that money from Google and invest it in AI. It's not as easy to do. So what I'm trying to do is basically say, okay, let's develop this AI agent, for example. Let's see how it works to maybe nurture old leads and stuff like that your current sales reps don't want to work. Let's use it that way so it pays for itself.
Yeah.
So
Is
that's
there
where
a
I'm at right now.
is there a special or it's not special, but specific role of AI or tactic within AI that you're especially bullish on? Maybe it is those old leads, or is it something else that you are especially excited about?
I'm surprised as I've been getting into this more and more is how much it's improved in the last 10 months. Like it's gotten to the point now where like I did this test and I basically fed an AI our website. So very first draft type stuff, right? And I told people like, "Hey, call this person and set an appointment for the campus. You might get a person, you might get AI, right?" 75% of the people were like, "Oh, it was an AI," but 25% of the people were like, "Yeah, I didn't get the AI, but they did." Right? So it's just improving so fast. I didn't realize how trainable it was, because I kind of looked at it like it's going to be a question and answer type thing. But as I'm getting into it, they're like, if you'd spend the time training it like you train a person, we should try it out. It can make phone calls for you. So, you know what? It's so early in the process to see all that it can do. It's definitely going to be an asset. It's kind of like, a lot of people use call centers, right, to set appointments. Well, if you could have an AI agent make the call and live transfer that call, it's probably going to be more efficient and less long term overhead
Yeah.
if you build it out yourself. So that's kind of where I'm looking at, kind of trying to get the economies of scale and just doing it ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned earlier about standardizing some of the processes over the portfolio, and I'm,
Yep.
I'm curious, how do you think and balance the standardization from developing each school's own approach? Because I'm sure each school has its own nuances.
So that's a good question, and so people are resistant to change. That's just a fact of life. I kind of believe what you need to embrace change, and you need to from the top down. You need to be taught. You need to show people the why. So a big part of for me has been to like, hey, here's the proven model of why this has been successful. Let them see that over time, and then get them to that level. So right now we're in the process of trying to benefit from all of what we have, right? Everybody has different knowledge base, different success bases, but each school is on a slightly different CRM, a slightly different SIS. And because they had individual leaders before, there wasn't like one core philosophy for this is how we're going to get a lead, this is how we're going to track a lead, this is going to how we work a lead. So over the next 6, 7 months, I'm going to try to unify all that basically. The challenge is usually just cost a lot of times because it's going to cost too much. And then, like I said, people are resistant to change. They're used to doing it one way, using one system. So, you know, I come from Missouri, which is the show me state. So it's very much, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's a Missouri philosophy. And so sometimes with some people, they don't realize, because it's like, hey, we're growing at 1 or 2% a year, but hey, we're growing at 10% a year. So it might not be broken, but it's not working at peak efficiency. So that's where
Right.
I have to kind of do the selling aspect of it to show them that, so that they'll all buy in.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. So, a question I like to ask is if you could bring together a small group of really smart marketers for an off the record discussion, what's the one topic that you'd want that room to help you think through?
So it's interesting. There used to be something, I don't know, you might be familiar with LeadsCon. Have you heard of LeadsCon before?
I've heard of it, yeah.
They used to, when they first started out, they used to have a meeting every year in Vegas. Now they do it in a couple of different places. They actually did this. They
Hmm.
actually had where they got some people together to talk, and had a meeting. It was very interesting. And, I think at the time, it was more philosophically different. This was about 10 years ago. So the focus was traditional media versus digital. And there was a definite line in the room where half the people just believed one way and half the people believed the other way. I think it will be super effective in today's environment, just because, you know what, different. One thing that I learned was that, and then it's gotten worse since then, because it now it's agenda driven. Like, they want certain people on there. Everyone's trying to sell something. So it went from being what you just described, well, just marketers off the record talking, to people trying to sell their product. So it kind of became worthless. But the first meeting, there was guys from different industries. So there was an insurance guy there. He was buying insurance lead. There was a payday loan guy that was doing stuff. There was mortgage insurance. So there was a few different people looking at leads differently, and talking to them allowed me to get a different insight into how they look at their business. Some of it wasn't scalable, but some of it I was able to be like, that's a good thing to do. So I think getting people from different industries and different backgrounds is very important. I also think it's great to share those ideas, because some of them might not make sense, but some of them do make sense. And I think a lot of times, it's like people kind of meet with the same people, and then you just are at the same place. So I think having that mix of specifically industries but leaders from them is very impactful, because it also makes a difference. Somebody that has $500 million in revenue a year, they can take different chances than the person making 50 or making five. But that doesn't mean what the person doing five isn't what they're doing can't be established by the person using
Sure.
500. Sometimes we get a little too lazy. So that would be my big thing, is diversification between industries. Because we're all going through the same things.
Yeah, yeah, I love that, and I think that's a good segue here to talk about partners. So as you think about building out your marketing organization, how are you deciding what capabilities to keep internal, and then what capabilities maybe would you look external to a marketing
So,
partner that might work
so
across different industries?
it's interesting. When I started out, it's funny that you say that, right? Money was everything. Money was really tight. And so it was like, hey, we can't afford to pay an agency because they're charging us an upcharge and everything they're doing. So you need to do it all yourself, Sandy. So that's how I started. So I didn't have anyone. So I pretty much have done everything myself. But there's things that, because it's just me, we had to contract out. So we had a couple of people now. We have an agency of record that we work with that kind of helps out. And really, I believe in having multiple people, being quick and nimble, as opposed to just one specific agency, is kind of what I've learned. But really, that was the biggest constraint, was the money in the beginning, which forced us to do it ourselves. And then over time now, I have people that I trust in different areas to do different things. And again, I'm a big believer in loyalty and trust. So, you know, um, as long as they can continue to learn and grow, and they don't get to the point where they're not helping us anymore, I'm comfortable with the people that we have. But in some cases, we have to give them more training. We've gotten outside our niche to try stuff, whether it was social media, for example. Worked with a bunch of companies that were getting data directly from Oracle, so we could target things differently. And one thing that we learned was, what, ads are not always the best thing on social media. We were paying a lot of money for ads. We didn't get the response. So we're like, we're not doing any more ads. We're just going to focus on students in action. We're not going to try to tell. We're not going to and we got much better response when we're just showing what's happening at the campus instead of trying to sell. So I think the media makes a big difference on
Yeah,
the approach.
interesting. Yeah, yeah. Where, given everything that's changing, as we've discussed throughout this interview here, where do you see agencies becoming more valuable to you, say, over the next year? Not just based on what you need maybe today, but based on where the businesses are headed.
So, I think I think it's going to vary from industry to industry, but what I'm noticing is that certain agencies are getting much more niche orientated because they realize that's what they need to focus on because there's too many things that are kind of doing everything. So we have some agencies that will focus on streaming and TV and YouTube and all that kind of stuff. So for me, um, that's what I kind of see more and more. I think the agencies want to do everything. Like every single person that we work with, they want to take over everything that we do.
Yeah,
They want to do the Google ads, they want to do the streaming, they want to do the YouTube, they want to do this, they want to do that. But I have it piecemealed out, so they're always. I think it forces people to always be better. Like, hey, I got four other companies that want to kind of do the same thing. Um, so to me, I think a lot of the agencies have always tried um, to deliver everything to somebody like the old group when there was a bunch of big agencies out there, right? um, I think in my industry, I'm only talking about my industry, right? There was like Throughline, it changed names a bunch of times. It was Platform Advertising. There was Becker. There's a few other ones. They tried to be the one-stop shop, whereas now in the information age, we need more transparency in terms of where the lead is coming from, where did that come from. And so I think those companies that embrace that kind of an attitude are going to be much more successful than the ones that are trying to just keep all the information to themselves. Do the agencies have a place? I think it's a huge opportunity for agencies that stay ahead of the curve, that get better at, like, for example, how to leverage AI and fold it into what's currently happening, because people don't have the time or the money, right, to invest in that because it's very expensive. You've seen the couple companies, Uber lost $500 million or something on Claude, right? So like there's just a lot of stuff like that out there. So them having that expertise, I think, is what they can bring, because a lot of the smaller companies and everything else are not going to be able to do that, and they're not going to have the wherewithal to do trial and error because
right.
margins are so tight. So I think when you can have that niche, whatever that may be that you're good at, that's when you'll see that agencies take off.
Yeah. So specialization over full service capability sounds like where you're leaning.
That's just what I'm seeing, and that's just what I'm seeing in the
Yeah.
industry, because like some people are good at this but they're not good at that, and so let's just have them do the what they're good at.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, you're obviously very revenue focused, and I think that's what got you to where you're at.
Yep.
How do you structure your team though, so that everyone is on board with those same types of outcomes and not just, activities?
That's funny. uh well, I don't really have a big team. Like there's just me.
Okay.
There's just me. Now I have a couple of different outsourced agencies that we work with. I have somebody that helps me with the website, somebody that kind of helps with the Google, somebody does the infrastructure, somebody that does the PPL. So I guess you could consider them all part of the team. But
Sure.
because the structure is set up in a certain way, they're just going to do what I say. I don't have to worry about buy-in, if that kind of makes sense to you. Now,
Yeah.
by the same token, on the other half of my job, yes, I have 100 admissions reps, director of admissions, all that kind of stuff, underneath me as well. So I'm able to make sure that they just both are on the same objective because there's one voice. As opposed to, like, even as some of the schools I'm taking over, they're used to having multiple voices in both areas. Like things are not the same in one state and another state, even though it's the same school, and it really should be some of the core philosophies. So I really haven't had that issue, I think, because I've had a little bit more control,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I guess I'm a little bit lucky. I also, before I had that, there was somebody else that was there that was in charge of admissions. Stuff wasn't as good because they had their own agendas. I'll put to you that way.
Yeah. What do you think agencies misunderstand about working with a school like STC?
I think a lot of times agencies they're obviously trying to make money, right? So they kind of come in and a lot of times they want to do um, a check of how things are going, right? So a lot of times what they do is it's like it's old school philosophy. Let's punch them in the gut. Let's tell them everything that's wrong and how we're going to be so much better for them. right? So I think that's a mistake approach that's worked in the past. I think today, in today's environment, it's better to show case studies, show your success from the places that you've already worked with, rather than trying to immediately identify these are all the things you're doing wrong.
Interesting. Okay. I
So,
like
but
that.
that's just philosophically. I know it's worked very successfully for some big groups. I know a lot of them, have made connections at a kind of a higher level. So but I think it's important to always understand what the campus is thinking in my particular industry.
Yeah. 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 So we talked a lot about work. As we wind things down, I have one more question I'd like to ask you. What gives you energy or helps you reset when you're not working and juggling, all the different schools and responsibilities that you have?
Um, I don't know. Energy's never been an issue for me. I know a lot of people, do a bunch of stuff. I have a couple glasses of tea. I don't really need it. I don't really. I just work like that. I think it's just in me. I always want to win. So, you know, that's kind of how I look at each and every day, each and every month, each and every class start, each and every quarter, each and every cycle. Everybody has differently. Is like, hey, I want to win, and I want all of you to feel the same way. I believe that sometimes um, I believe in setting goals and objectives and pushing through to them in every aspect, whatever that is. It's like, hey, if we like when I started out, right, the cost per start was about $2,200. Okay. We were making money, but I was like, hey, I want to get that to $1,000. People thought I was crazy because it was so much. I'm like, I'm not saying I'm gonna do that tomorrow, but we need to have a goal that we work to. We're at about $770 now, 10 years later, whatever it is, right? So, it's just a matter, and I think that's really important to give yourself goals and to be measurable, but try to get that philosophy down through all the people in the department. No, they say no man is an island. If you can have the lowest person, like your brand new rep that's just starting off, and you can condition them to have that mentality, and you can keep on training and developing their capabilities. People need to have something to move up towards as well. If they feel like, once they feel like, hey, I can't go any further, they kind of stop working any harder. So that's a big part of what I always try to do is create those opportunities for people, knock on wood. We've promoted from within, within the sales departments and stuff like that. We keep doing well that way. And I think that makes a really, really big difference. And that kind of is what drives me personally is, like I was telling you about my dad you get in trouble with the insurance company because people didn't have money. He wasn't going after them in collections or whatever because he was like, hey, my job as a doctor is to help people, kind of, right? And I'm not doing anything remotely like that, but I do believe we're in the business of changing lives. I do believe that if they come to our school, we know the outcome's going to be good, better than going to someone else. There's a lot of negativity about career colleges and all these kind of things, but there shouldn't be if you do things the right way. So that's kind of what drives me is that I know we're making a difference in people's life. Everybody wants to make more money, but when you go to graduation and this person they started off as a medical assistant and they're coming to tell you 10 years later that they're a nurse and they bought their own house and all these kind of things, and they're still thanking you for that hour you spent with them, there's no price you can put on that. And that's the best motivation you can have. And I think because I worked myself up and I've done everything in my organization, like every single job, I don't mind sitting at the front desk. It doesn't matter to me. I think that's important. I think that's what drives me.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great way to end the show. So, Sandy, this has been amazing. I really commend you and what you've done and how you've built your career. I really appreciate the insights shared here today. So, to everybody watching, don't forget to follow CMO Journeys for more conversations with the market leaders that are shaping what's next. I'm Christian Banach. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.